Okay, so now that I'm done with this project and I'm ready to do a lock stitch, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring the needle up from the right to the wrong side of the fabric, push it all the way through, and then come back just a tiny bit to create a backwards loop. So I'm pulling the needle back along the line of stitching that I've already created. And I'm going to pull that through. Now I am going to tighten this loop, but I'm going to leave it loose for just a second so you can see what I'm doing. So this top part is the beginning of the loop. The bottom part is the end of the loop. So once I've got one in, I'm going to bring my needle back up through the top, that same exact hole that I made when I created the top of that loop. Can you see that? The needle is coming through the exact same hole that I used when I created the top of the loop. So let me tighten that particular stitch. And then I'm going to do, I like to work in threes, so I'm going to make 3 of them. That was number 1. Here comes number 2. Good. And then number 3. Now on number 3, I am not going to tighten my loop. In fact, I'm going to leave it loose. And when I bring my needle back up again, so we're going to leave that last loop loose. And when I bring my needle back up again through that exact same hole, what I'm going to do is take the top of that loose loop and wrap it around my needle. I like to work in threes, so I'm going to do it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So I've got 3 loops on the needle, and I'm going to pull it down really, really tight and use my fingernail to hold that in place as I pull everything tight. So I'm going to bring the needle out and pull everything tight to create that nice flat knot right there at the end of my line of stitching. And once I've got that lock stitch in place and I'm sure that everything has been pulled tight, then I can clip my lock stitch, clip the tail of the thread so that I've got that nice clean lock stitch there at the end. And that completes my line of stitching. Actually, it's just going to be 1 to finish us off here. And then I'm going to do my lock stitch. So I'm going to come down and back up to create a single loop, a single stitch. And I'm going to not pull that all the way through so that you can see what I'm doing here. Let me let that focus. There we go. Okay, so that's a single stitch. I have not pulled it tight because I'm trying to show you exactly what's going on here. So this is the top of my loop and this is the bottom. Okay, so that's a single stitch. I'm going to now take my needle and go back over that exact stitch. So my needle is going to go back in the bottom and back out the top of that exact same stitch that I just made. Okay. That was stitch number 1. This is stitch number 2. See, I'm using the exact same holes that I made before. Stay in focus, please. There we go. Okay, we're starting to want to tangle a little bit. All right, that's stitch number 2. Now, on stitch number 3, I am not going to pull the thread tight. So I'm going to go in and out, just like I've been doing, to create that 3rd stitch. But instead of pulling it, what I'm going to do is take the tail from the top of my stitch, and I'm going to wrap it around. I like to work in numbers of 3. It makes me happy. You can do 5. You can do 17 if you want. I think that's a waste of thread. But I like to work in odd numbers like 3s and 5s. So I like to do 3 loops around my needle point. 1. Oh, please stay in focus while I'm doing this. Hang on. There we go. Okay. So I'm bringing my tail around my needle point 3 times. There's 1. Back in front, bringing it around for time number 2, And then one more time all the way around, time number 3. So now I have 3 loops around my needle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my thread really, really tight against my last stitch by holding it in place with my thumbnail. And I'm going to pinch really, really hard on that fabric so that it's kind of a struggle to get my needle out. I might even have to wiggle it a little to work it through. What that's doing is that's holding that knot in place until I can get it good and tight. So I'm going to pull the thread out and pull as hard as I can. And what's happening is it's making this nice flat knot right there. It's a bit difficult to see it because it's kind of buried down in my fabric. But once I've got that in place, stay in focus, please. Autofocus is the worst. All right, once I've got that in place, then I can snip away my excess thread and we're done.